This is Josie. Here she is just about a little before she was 1. And when she was 1, she got her first lead test. Can you see her face? She's not happy because her blood lead levels were 7 micrograms per deciliter, which prompted a renovation of our home. We had to address the lead that was on the woodwork in our home. So we moved out of our house and we moved into the French Quarter. And as Howard has pointed out to you in his previous lecture, it was the French Quarter was a hotspot, but we did not know that. So in other news, Josie gets a brother and his name is Thomas. And we start spending a lot of time at the playground near the French Quarter. And Josie's blood lead levels skyrocket to 17. We find out through testing that this is due to the high lead levels in the soil at the playground. The playground that we were playing at, Mardi Park, tested at over 400 parts per million. And we realized that a lot of that had to do with the houses that were surrounding the park were being gentrified post-Katrina, and they were all getting sanded, and the old paint was coming off, turning to dust and going into the soil. And that was, and all over the playground equipment. And so the playground, the place that we were playing to have a safe space for our daughter, because everybody kept saying that, you know, Children's Services was calling us and telling us we weren't keeping our house clean enough, and that the safest place to play was outside at playgrounds. So that's where we went, and this is what happened. So that stirred me into action, and I became a lead advocate, and I started NOLA Unleaded. We tested 13 playgrounds all over the city. 11 of those playgrounds tested over 400 parts per million. We took that information along with Howard's maps of the city, and we met with the city council and the mayor, and all 11 of the playgrounds were shut down and they were remediated. But the way that it was done left a lot to be desired. So they were all done the same way, and the first 3 layers of soil, 3 feet of soil, were dug up and put into trucks and taken away. And none of this was done like with water or any kind of, it was dusty. And the trucks were open air containers, so there was dust and dirt falling off of the trucks as they were rolled away. And it put a lot of this lead soil, which was safely buried in the ground, into the air and into people's lungs and into people's blood. We tried talking to people about it, and they said, you know, this is just how it's being done. It's being done. And then it was done, and it was done forever. And I've spent a lot of time going back to the mayor and the city council and asking them to reopen the lead work. And they have all said that they've actually been plainly clear about it, that they fulfilled their campaign promises and their projects were now finished, and that I should stop bothering them. So we turned to home remedies, which, as Children's Services always told me, I needed to clean my house more. I assure you I'm a pretty clean person, but I listened to Children's Services and I wet mop my house a lot more often. I got my kids into a more green diet to help them scrub their blood. We also relied on the half-life of lead and the time that it takes for lead to get out of their body. And then we looked at what the lead takes away from children, which is empathy and the ability for reading comprehension. So we had to teach our children how to feel for other people and how to really pay attention to what they're reading and understanding. And, you know, this tutoring and, you know, mostly just us talking to them a lot and bringing these points to their attention. As a community effort, we created, we found pamphlets from the EPA, and we use these pamphlets if we see a renovation project I or anyone else involved with NOLA Unleaded keep these in our glove box, and we bring them to drop them off when people are renovating. What we're really hoping to create or find is bilingual information, a simple card that we could give to an actual worker that makes sure that they know that the work they're doing might be unsafe for themselves and for their family, and how they might protect their own children from getting, if they're sanding paint, what they need to do to take the, make sure that their kids aren't inhaling the paint chips or getting it in their car or in their laundry. We had a publication on the Mother Jones article that was really extensive, and I think it reached a lot of people nationally. And then on a local level, things like this came out. One of the things that we're talking about in New Orleans is how to make Mardi Gras more green. And I think this last year, we actually did have a Mardi Gras in 2020. It was the last thing we had. And it was much more green than I have seen in other years, because the mayor cleaned the gutters right before, and there were 42 tons of Mardi Gras beads in the sewage lines. So then 4 becomes 5, and Eli is born. That's our happy family. And the kids grow up, and we learn that we have to live with lead, that all 3 kids are going to struggle with elevated lead levels despite all my efforts. And we have many calls from Children's Services with a lot of blame. And so to counteract that, we create our own support. And that's why NOLA Unleaded became, that's really what NOLA Unleaded is a support for families. And to let them know that they can do things, and it's not going to come from Children's Services, but they can do things to help their children. And then Josie, you can see that was the baby. She is the beginning. She's now a lot bigger, and we wanted to help her sort of find her own voice. And this is also great for her, her empathy and her, it's a bit of closure for her in some way. She was having a hard time explaining what had happened. So this gave her voice, gave her a voice. And so we talked about what the book was for, and we put it together to support families, just like NOLA Unleaded supports families. And we tried to make it a local book that talks about New Orleans, but so Mardi Gras Toxicity is an example, but it's also, we tried to think about it locally and at least nationally. So she introduced herself as a host. It's sort of like a television host. And she tells the whole country why to test for lead. And she says that it's very important to test and not just guess what has lead and what doesn't, because things are pretty tricky. So you'll see like these old scratched up sculptures that obviously look like they have lead, they don't. And some of these toys that look like, some of these toys have lead and some of them don't, depending on when they were made. So we pay attention to what is actually in it, not just what we think might be in it. And then there's the big scoop. Every reporter needs a big scoop. And this is what Howard was explaining to us, that gas and also paint, but this is about the gas, still contains lead, and it's not gone, it is outlawed, but trace elements are considered acceptable. And each gallon of gas contains the equivalent of 1 gram of lead, about the same size as this pack of sugar. And there's an image of the sugar packets on top of a car, so you can see with each gallon of gas there's another, and it adds up, and there's quite a bit of of lead in your car every time you fill it up. And then she talks about playground setup, cleanup, because this is near and dear to her heart, because playground is where she was lead poisoned, and how to safely remove toxins so that they don't become airborne. This is our neighborhood playground that was cleaned, was dealt with properly because it was contained rather than digging up. This was done by the community as opposed to by the city. And then we talk about our greatest nemesis, which is the leaf blower monster. I know you've all heard them and you think that they're a problem for your ears, but they're more of a problem because they're sending that dust with the lead positive dust into the air and into our lungs and into our blood. In New Orleans, they're illegal by city ordinance, but the city themselves use the blowers. It's pretty impressive that we understand that this shouldn't be used, and yet we use it, that it's being used regularly in our city. And we talk about the toxicity of beads. They're made out of recycled computer parts, just the shiny ones. So it would be really easy to not have recycled computer part beads, but it's an uncontrolled import because they're considered novelty items, not to be in reach of children. So it doesn't matter that 24,000 parts per million are lead in one particular Mardi Gras bead. When anything over 100 parts per million should never come in contact with kids. And here's the information that the 46 tons were pulled out from the drains last year, just before our last Mardi Gras. So we got to see how much of these toxic materials are sitting in our water system and going out into our bayous. I offered forward our recipe for cilantro pesto, which is a good blood scrubber, and explain to people one of the plants and grass that they can use to make a lead-free space. So, you know, Howard was talking about the top inch of soil he's testing because that's where children play. And what we're talking about is creating a safe space for children by having the soil contained by grass and leafy greens. And this is your news report. So thank you.